All right, one last look at your traffic and weather for your ride in on this Wednesday morning. Couple accidents to report, one at I-126 eastbound, and Greystone, one at I-20 westbound and I-77. Forest Drive near Percival, Leesburg at Garner's Ferry, as well as there is a sinkhole out here at Assembly Street. So be careful as you're making your way through the city here around Gervais. Today, cloudy and a high of 76. Tomorrow, cloudy and a high of 80. Partly cloudy on Friday and a high of 83. Currently 50 in downtown Columbia here on The Game. All right, 9 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, along with you here in studio. Jack Feltry joining me on the AAA heating and air phone lines because it is finally the first day of spring practice. We'll get to the news of the hour in a moment, but in general, Jack, how are we feeling on the opening day of spring practice?
I feel fine. Yeah, I'm feeling good. Glad that we have this to distract us from the ongoing, basically horror movie that is South Carolina men's basketball and baseball this year. So I'm joking. It's not that deep. They are struggling though. But yeah, man, it'll be nice to get out here and watch some football this morning. It'll be brief. It'll be quick. It'll fly by in an instant. I'm sure we'll have a little bit to talk about later on in the show. But yeah, man, it's good to get out here. And plus, like you just read off during the traffic report, the weather seems to finally be improving, which I'm a big fan of.
We'll see if anybody is a weather complainer. That's what always bothers Wes the most, is people that complain about weather. It's not going to be insanely hot today. Like I said, high of about 76 degrees and still a little cool right now. So hopefully we won't have any weather complainers out there this time.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. It's probably going to be a little bit chilly. I'm wearing shorts and a T-shirt right now with just regular sneakers. I will say, though, it's a little bit chilly right now. It's 58. It's not too bad. But we're probably going to be in the shade, the media that is, if we're outside. So it might be a little bit cooler, and you may hear some complaints or something about that, but I think it'll be fine.
We will certainly see. Jack is going to be a very busy man this morning. He'll hopefully be back in studio around about an hour from now, but he'll get some observations out there at spring practice, and we'll get his thoughts on that. But while we have him here for this first segment, before he heads over to the facility, there is a lot of news to get to right after the Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up. It is time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803-ALL-9s. If you've been living under the rock for the past 24 hours, the news, unfortunately, is Josiah Thompson, who was returning this year after being in the transfer portal for a brief period of time, is expected to miss the 2026 season with some form of a lower body injury that we learned from Coach Beamer yesterday. And Jack, you mentioned a moment ago how bad things are going for men's sports right now. I really feel for Gamecock fans because they can't win anywhere, right? Men's basketball is having a disastrous season. Baseball's off to a rough start. Obviously, the football team went 4-8 last year. You already lost Jacarius Peak for the offseason a couple weeks ago with his injury, and now you lose Josiah Thompson for the entire year. It just never seems to end, man. That chicken curse is a real thing.
Chicken curse. You know, I've never understood why people continue to use the chicken curse as the excuse for why all things are going bad in South Carolina athletics. You know, if I'm not mistaken, the chicken curse technically ended about 16 years ago when baseball won the College World Series. I thought that was such a big emphasis during that documentary that came out on SEC Network last year about the College World Series teams that went back-to-back for South Carolina. So I don't really think it's the chicken curse. I just think it is bad luck. I will say that. But, yeah, to blame everything on the chicken curse, I think is a little bit of a cop-out, a little bit of a lame excuse. I'll say this, though. It's a tough break. And the other thing is, Shane mentioned it yesterday. South Carolina's kind of known about this for the last year or two. And I think, I think this is probably the right time for him to get this surgery because he is a returning starter, but obviously his play wasn't great last year. And I don't think it was necessarily some guarantee that he was going to start this year because, number one, I know Jacarius Peak is also hurt right now, but you're going to get him back this season, and he'll be starting on the offensive line at some point at tackle. So that takes one spot away. And then there's no guarantee that Josiah would have started at the other spot. So I think it's probably the best time for him to get this surgery and make a full recovery and then, use his red shirt. Take this year to learn because, again, like I said, he really didn't perform that well last year. Take this year to just get mental reps, learn, get better, come back healthy in 2027 because they're going to need him. Because when you think about it, man, I don't know who's going to be starting on this offensive line for sure. We will probably not see the starting five today out there practice. But what I can say is they have a ton of veterans on this offensive line, returners, transfers. They're going to need Josiah next year when those guys are no longer here. So this is a big year for him. Even though he's not going to be out in the field, it's a big year for him to kind of just get himself back healthy, get himself back in shape, and get ready to go for 27.
Let's hear a little bit more detail from Coach Beamer yesterday on this Josiah Thompson injury and the timeline of it.
Yeah, not really. I don't want to stand up here and tell you something and sound like an idiot in regards to where it stems from and things like that. And then in regards to specifically what it is, I just say, lower body injury and keep it at that, and whatever he or family or anybody else want to elaborate on. It's nothing long term beyond the upcoming season, and disappointed for him. But in order for him to be at his best, it's what needed to happen. He just had some limitations in the weight room because of it that was preventing him from probably being as strong in the lower body as he needs to be. And in order to continue to gain weight and be the player that he wants to be, this will be a thing that will alleviate some of that. That will allow him to take another step as a player. And again, I know it's, oh my God, Pete got hurt playing basketball, and there's Josiah, who the heck's going to play left tackle. We'll be fine. We got a lot of really good players in that offensive line room, and Pete will be back healthy. And when Josiah gets back, he'll be the best version of himself that he's been in his career also.
When I hear that, Jack, and I heard that yesterday during the presser, it to me maybe explained a little bit of why Josiah Thompson struggled so much last year, right? Because we definitely saw a significant step back, and you mentioned the thing about not being able to be as efficient in the weight room because Josiah Thompson just looked weak. I think about so many games last year, Missouri, Oklahoma, where he was just getting pushed around like a marshmallow. It's like, man, what's wrong? This guy's got the size. He's obviously got the experience of being a starter from his freshman year. Why does he look so weak? Maybe that's the explanation of it. And again, Beamer didn't give us specifics. We just know it's somewhere down in the lower body, so that can mean a litany of different things. But this is possibly a reason why he took the step back that he did last year.
You hope that is the reason he took the step back and it wasn't just poor performance. Like, you really hope it is just the injury because he did have a pretty good freshman year for South Carolina in his first year starting. So, yeah, I mean, look, this is a tough blow, but like Beamer did say, they're going to be fine, right? It's not like I think it'd be a little bit more dire if Jacarius was out for the year, right? But he's not. He's going to be. Beamer has said he's going to be back, ready to roll in September. So that's about as good as news as you could have for a guy that I think a lot of people were hitting the panic button right away that he's going to be out for the year and he tore his ACL and all this and that. Seems like he's going to be okay here in a few months. And then you lose Josiah. It's one guy. Now, what does that mean going forward? I think that opens up a lot of competition here starting in the spring for the tackle spots. I mean, look, when Pete gets healthy, he'll be back up there starting at one of the tackle spots more likely than not. But this really does give an opportunity for other guys to compete. And that's one thing that Shane really mentioned a lot yesterday is that word compete. So there are a lot of guys on this team, a lot of opportunities out there. And I don't think it's a lost cause yet that, you know, 2 guys get hurt and everything's crushed on the offensive line. Like, they have like 20-plus guys for a reason.
This could also explain why Josiah Thompson maybe did end up coming back to South Carolina, because if this is an injury that the coaching staff was aware of to some degree in the midst of last season when Josiah Thompson decides to enter his name in the transfer portal, well, guess what? Other teams are going to do their due diligence and trying to find out everything they can. If they found out this injury was something that was going to crop up and potentially keep him out for the 2026 season, I could see why other teams wouldn't be willing to take that chance or pay a large amount of money to have a guy that might not be available for the upcoming year. So that could all play into why Josiah Thompson did ultimately decide to take his name out of the transfer portal and come back to South Carolina. And, you know, when you couple it in with the Peak injury from the other week, I think we were so intrigued, right, to see what Josiah Thompson was going to do this offseason with a new offensive line coach, with a refreshed sense of energy and attitude or whatever that may be, to see what improvements he can make. Because I think we put a lot of his struggles last year on Lonnie Teasley, and now maybe it's due in part to the injury as well. And I think we're excited to see what he was going to do with a fresh set of eyes on him, a new coaching staff when it comes to the offensive line to try and get the most out of him. Because, again, he was a 5-star kid coming out of high school. We know what his ceiling of potential is supposed to be based on those ratings alone, and we saw glimpses of that in his freshman year. And, again, last year was a step back, and now, unfortunately, you do have to wait another calendar year to see that. And again, that's best case scenario, because as we know, and there have been several offensive linemen that have dealt with this over the past couple seasons, injuries can continue to crop up. So you hope Josiah Thompson can have these procedures, get himself back to 100% health, and we never have to talk about this stuff again. But you do have to worry when you have one injury, especially when it's lower body, considering you're carrying all that body weight as an offensive lineman, these things can continue to persist, and we hope that's not the case with Josiah Thompson.
Especially with the wear and tear on the body. And I think the same thing can be said for Peak, even when he's back healthy, because we know with that it is a lower body injury as well. So you're kind of hoping like these guys are going to be okay moving forward. It's just there is a lot of stress on the lower body because they wear the I think like the knee guards that they wear for a reason. So I mean, look, they're squatting down, they're putting a lot of pressure on those legs, and so that's something that is definitely they're going to have to be cautious about that probably throughout the training to get back healthy, and of course at the start of whenever they get back to playing as well. But yeah, I mean, you hope that they make full recoveries here and that they'll be fine, and that this will be the last of the injuries, because we saw a few years ago, it's not really relevant to right now, but we've seen South Carolina's offensive line take big injury hits before, kind of like this. And luckily, I think the only silver lining is that it's happening now and hopefully not when the season gets going. Like, again, Peak will be back before when the season starts. Josiah's going to have surgery here soon. He won't be back for the season, but you know what you're getting. You're getting him back for 27. Hopefully this is the last of the offensive line injuries, because I really don't know if Gamecock fans can take any more injury news, especially if it's any worse than any other big guys.
Before we let you get out to practice, what, if anything, are you hoping to see today?
I'm just looking forward to seeing the new guys out there. I don't know how much we're going to get to see. I just want to see some of these new guys and what we were told and advertised about what they're going to do, right? It's probably going to be just helmets today with the jerseys on and everything. It's not going to be anything crazy, but just seeing some of these newer guys out here, I think is the main thing. That's probably going to be the main thing all spring, Tyler, just because we have, I think, 5 or 6 different practices that'll be open to the media over the next month. It's going to be a real big, important time for us, and I think a lot of the coaches and whatnot, too, and the staff to learn about these new players they have and what they're bringing in, just because there's so much newness on this team.
Well, we'll follow along on Gamecock Central. Hope to have you back in here in about an hour, and let's hope nobody else gets hurt today.
Yeah, hopefully not. I'll see you in about an hour, buddy.
All right, Jack Veltri out there at spring practice, and we'll get some updates from him a little bit later on in the show. But continuing on with the Josiah Thompson conversation, what's the plan now at offensive line? We'll hear what Coach Beamer had to say about that yesterday in reference to Josiah Thompson. Coming up next as the Extra Point rolls along. Tyler Head along with you here on your Wednesday on the Game. Tyler Ed here for our friends over at Twin Peaks Columbia. It's time to head to your ultimate sports lodge. That is Twin Peaks over on Gervais Street. They are serving scratch-made eats, wall-to-wall big games on giant TVs, and, of course, those 29-degree famous ice-cold draft beers that hit just right. Whether you're catching March Madness hoops, cheering on the Gamecocks, or just craving a hand-smashed burger, wings, tacos, or juicy steak, Twin Peaks has got you covered on all fronts. Their fun, friendly team is ready to make every visit epic. Dine in, grab takeout, or order delivery, and swing by 600 Gervais Street right in the heart of the Vista. Come for the views and stay for the victory. Twin Peaks, Columbia, where every day is a peak experience. All right, welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you, flying solo for the next little bit while Jack Veltry's out there practice. And again, we'll be following along on Gamecock Central for updates, and we'll get him in here in about an hour to provide his thoughts and insight from what he gets to see from this week's availability. Again, they'll be out there about once a week, getting to view hopefully more than just stretches. Maybe we'll get some actual drills and stuff, but we'll see. Again, we've really begin the new season now with spring practice getting rolling, and again, hopefully nobody gets hurt. And the latest news in the morning, of course, going back to yesterday, was the announcement of the Josiah Thompson injury. In fact, most of you probably didn't hear it live when it happened. We, of course, cover or carry the Shane Beamer press conference when he speaks anytime. And yesterday, unfortunately, it's kind of been the case here as of late. There were audio issues, so we didn't formally hear him say that. And even when listening to the replay of the presser yesterday, that part was like edited out because there wasn't any audio for it. So I, like many of you, probably hopped on Twitter while those audio issues were happening to see all the reporters like Jack, like Jordan Kay, David Cloninger all say, hey, Josiah Thompson out for the upcoming year, and just, put your, face in your hands and say, my goodness, what else can happen now? But it is what it is. You're not going to have him. Again, Jacarius Peak expected to be back by the time the season gets here, and you have to figure out what's next. And that's something that Coach Beamer talked about yesterday, was what are the plans for the two tackle spots now that two possible starters, one of them for sure in Jacarius Peak, and the other one possibly in Josiah Thompson, are not going to be available for the duration of the offseason.
Yeah, we've got some guys with some flexibility. Certainly, I think this is no different, and y'all have heard me say this before during spring practice, trying to maximize what guys can do, and the more you can do, the better. With this portal class, with this high school class, we've brought in some guys on the offensive line, certainly, that have position flexibility, that can play multiple positions along the offensive line. And this will be, it stinks, I'm not going to lie, but it's an opportunity now for these other guys to get more work and get better, and then figure out what it best looks like. So in regards to what it's going to look like, the first rep of practice tomorrow from left to right, not going to get into all that. Jordan and some of these guys can break down the offensive line depth chart and where they line up in individual drills tomorrow. But really, we got 15 practices to figure out, who goes where and who can do what, knowing we got Darius Gray coming in here in the summertime too, along with getting Jay Peak back healthy too, who I just saw downstairs with his mom and is doing awesome and in great spirits.
So if you trust the handy-dandy scholarship breakdown on GamecockCentral.com, which I use religiously, there are 5 listed true tackles on this roster, with Peak, Smith, Nevaez, Thompson, and Damola Ajudahan. So you've now lost 2 of those guys. Thompson obviously out for the season. Jacarius Peak out for the duration of the preseason. So you have 3 true tackles according to the scholarship breakdown. But as Coach Beamer mentioned there, you have other guys that have position versatility, which that's always going to be a plus for situations like this where you can move guys around if need be. Shed Surratt has the ability to play tackle. Obviously, he played the most of last year at the guard spot, and we expect that would maybe be the case again this year, but he has the ability to move to the outside and play a tackle spot too, so that's certainly something within the realm that you could be doing through spring and summer as well. You also have guys like Dane Arnett as well as Emmanuel Poku that both have tackle experience. Again, looking at the scholarship breakdown, they're both listed as interior offensive linemen, but given the fact that they do have that experience playing on the outside, that is probably something that they will be potentially asked to do over the course of this preseason as well. The thing that sucks the most about this is continuity, right? And that's something we talk about so much with the offensive line. And unfortunately, when you go back to like 3 seasons ago now in 2023, where South Carolina couldn't keep offensive linemen healthy, they went through the first, I think it was 9 games before they finally had consistency on the offensive line. And by then the season was all but done. I know they were still playing for bowl eligibility in the last game of that season against Clemson, but it was a definite detriment to that team that they couldn't keep the same starting 5 on the field week after week after week. And when you look at what this offseason has been so far, in the wake of moving on from Lonnie Teasley, you kind of, as expected, had a lot of offensive linemen decide to go into the transfer portal for a moment. Josiah Thompson was one of those guys, but Tree and Tro and Case and Henry and all these other guys have decided to play their college football or continue their college football elsewhere. And hey, best of luck to them if that's what they choose to do. And you've really overhauled almost this entire room compared to where it was, a year ago. I mean, just looking at this list of guys here, I mean, Shed Surratt's coming back, Blake Franks, Marquis Anderson, Nolan Hay, obviously Josiah Thompson, and that was it. Everybody else is new in some form or fashion from a year ago. And we had an idea, and you can read Gamecock Central and the Big Spur, and people like Wes Mitchell have put out what their way too early depth chart projections were for the offensive line, but we don't know, right? Like, we think Carter Miller is going to be your starting center. We had a pretty good feeling that Shakarius Peak was going to be your starting left tackle, and I still think that'll be the case once he's back and healthy. But these are all, regardless of what it looks like, it's all a bunch of guys that have never played together before. And that's something that you have to establish in the offseason, is the continuity. That's something you have to get reps with in spring practice. You have to get reps with in fall camp leading up to the season to make sure everybody understands everybody by the time the season comes around. Because, again, it's a unit that moves as one. And when you're a center, understanding what the guard to the left of you and the guard to the right of you are going to do is huge in terms of how you move and how that offensive line functions. And you're going to be missing at least a part of that, or a couple parts of that, throughout this offseason, without what we think is going to be your starting left tackle and somebody that was in the mix to be your starting right tackle as well, and Josiah Thompson. And again, you'll have placeholders, again, to Seth Smith and Nieves and, Poku or whoever ends up occupying those two tackle spots. But if those guys aren't going to be in those spots when the season rolls around, that's still something the interior offensive linemen are going to have to get used to, and create that gelling and continuity and all that kind of stuff when starters do end up returning. Now, the interesting thing here is now right tackle's wide open. Again, if you thought Josiah Thompson was going to be in that spot, or maybe you didn't, now you have to figure out who that other guy's going to be. And that's what this competition in time's for. Randy Clements has got his work cut out for him, right? I think he knew he was coming into a very, interesting place to have to fix what's been an issue for the past handful of years. I don't know if he expected to be dealing with this many issues before spring practice even began, but hey, that's why you get paid a lot of money. He's an experienced guy, obviously well-versed in the Kendall Briles offense, that we're putting our faith in to figure this out, right? And obviously develop and get guys to the point of where they're able to play at a high level and be competitive in the SEC. And again, now you're going to be doing it down a couple guys that were projected as possible starters, and having to go from there. So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know when we're going to hear from Randy Clements, but I think he's going to be one of the most sought-after interviews in this offseason, that's for sure, as he tries to piece all this together and craft a starting offensive line with not everybody available as of right now. So we'll see. Again, practice getting rolling here in about 10 minutes, and again, we'll keep you updated on what Gamecock Central and other outlets have in terms of what they see and what we know of practice number one so far through the spring. But a lot of other sports in action right now for the Gamecocks, including men's basketball last night. Won't focus as much on the game, but more of what was going on in the arena last night that is troublesome as we look ahead to what's next for Gamecock men's basketball. We'll hit that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tower Head along with you here on your Wednesday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. We'll get back more into the football conversation coming up at the top of the hour, but a lot of other Gamecock sports in action right now, including men's basketball last night, the final home game of the season. We'll get into the optics of what the building looked like last night coming up in a moment, but the game itself will be focus number one, and I guess no surprise, South Carolina takes on a ranked Tennessee team, and they just kind of get run over. 78-59 the final score, another 15-point loss for this team, and there's been a lot of those in Lamont Paris era, unfortunately. And look, Tennessee was having their way with Carolina last night, throwing down dunks, 15 of them last night, as they were just doing whatever they wanted, especially at the rim. 23 of 29 at the rim last night, as Carolina, again, just lacks a paint presence that they have the entire year. By the way, Tennessee almost outscored South Carolina just on their paint points alone with 56 compared to South Carolina's 59 total, on the entire game. And, as we come towards the end of the regular season, this team hasn't really been playing for really anything over the course of the past basically month or so, but you still go out there every game hoping to see good performances out of the guys that you hope can go out there and play well. And Meechie Johnson did go out there and get 20 points in his final game at Colonial Life Arena, but as Coach Paris described after the game, too many guys around him just simply played poorly.
We can't have all those guys play poorly. I mean, there's giving up offensive rebounds and not fighting and being as aggressive as we wanted to, and then there's also playing poorly. And so you can't do both of those things. It's hard to consistently, for some guys to consistently have a baseline of product that they put out. And so today we had multiple guys that just didn't have a good day offensively. And so that just makes it hard. That's why you're going to put up a number that's in the 50s. And if you put up a number that's in the 50s, you're putting so much pressure on your defense to come and hold a team like that down. And it's just difficult. It's not realistic, honestly. But so we needed a couple more guys just to play better. Don't have to play great, but just play better.
For reference, again, Meechie Johnson had 20 points in his final game over at CLA, but the other four starters combined to go 5 of 17 from the field and had 14 total points combined on the night. Eli Ellis went 0 for 4 from the field last night, only got 2 points, both of those coming from the free throw line. Funny enough, Norton Capich, who's done most of nothing through at least conference play, did have 13 points last night, including going 3 of 5 from the three-point line, from outside the three-point line. So that was interesting to see, but obviously not a good enough performance to be able to hang in there with a team like Tennessee that's ranked inside the top 25, that's going to have opportunities to maybe have a deep run in the NCAA tournament coming up here in a couple weeks. But look, when we talk about men's basketball, we're just waiting for the season to come to an end, right? We've been slowly looking at the watch, looking at the calendar, saying, all right, X amount more games, and now in the instance, one more game in the regular season coming up against Ole Miss on Saturday on the road, and then you'll be in action a week from today in the opening round of the SEC tournament. As of right now, you're the 16th seed, which, based on the latest projections, would have you playing Texas A&M and Buckyball once again to open things up, and then after that, you're done. And then there's decisions that have to be made in reference to the future of the men's basketball program. And last night, the thing that was the biggest conversation point around Gamecock Twitter in reference to last night's game was not the play that happened on the field, but merely the attendance. And Jack, who was there covering the game last night for senior night, put out a picture that's made its rounds of, quite frankly, what everything looked like minutes before tip-off. Last night's game started at 6 o'clock, and at 5:48, Jack Veltri put out the photo of what CLA looked like, and it was a ghost town. I'm not going to say I can count on one hand how many people were there, but it's not a whole lot, right? And especially for like a senior night, right, where somebody like Meechie Johnson that's been around the program for a long time, is being honored for his final game at CLA. You thought maybe a few more people might be in attendance. Devin Downey was honored last night. That wasn't enough to draw more people out there. Again, we can debate of how much promotion there was for that, as we talked about with plenty of other things, but that's besides the point of what we're talking about right now. I look at this photo of a almost empty Colonial Life Arena, and I wonder how Jeremiah Donati, if Lamont Paris is coming back next year, and we talked yesterday about Matt Norlander being the latest national talking head of college basketball, saying that he thought that Lamont was likely going to come back, and that kind of falls in line with things that we've heard over the past couple of weeks, that it seems like that's going to be the case, with the hope that you're allocating more resources to allow him to build a better roster where he can be more successful in the SEC. But I look at this, and I wonder how Jeremiah Donati sells this to people, right? Because, again, we're in an era of college sports where it comes down in a lot of ways to your fans, your alumni, writing checks, right? Because they have to believe in what you're doing and be willing to put forward their hard-earned money to help you out. And if I'm Jeremiah Donati and I'm looking at an empty Colonial Life Arena, knowing maybe that I'm planning on bringing Lamont Paris back, how do I sell that to people, right? Like, am I able to convince the people that are high-level donors for the University of South Carolina, am I able to convince those people that if they write another 7-figure check or whatever it may be, that there's going to be better results on the court next year? And maybe there will be. We don't know, because Lamont Paris has not been put in the position of having a ton of money to spend on a roster. I will say it looks more impressive now what he did do 2 years ago, taking a team that was nowhere near the top of the SEC budget-wise to the NCAA tournament and fighting for a conference championship, funny enough, against Tennessee in the last week of the regular season. But, like, how easy of a sell is that going to be to these people? I don't know. And maybe Jeremiah Donati has inklings and insight ahead of time that, Lamont Paris is liked enough as a person and as a coach that people are going to be willing to do that and give him one more chance. I don't know that. But to me, that's a tough sell, right? You can be the biggest Gamecock fan in the world. You can be the biggest Lamont Paris as a person supporter in the world. But the results through 4 years, and 3 of those seasons haven't been there. And you're taking quite a risk by saying, all right, well, we believe if we just get him X amount of dollars, he's going to be able to right this ship. And, again, I'm not in position myself to write those kind of checks. I've never had that kind of money in my life. But Jeremiah Donati has his work cut out for him in terms of convincing these people that are those significant contributors to be willing to back Lamont Paris for one more year if that is indeed what is going to happen. Again, we're just going off of what's being reported, what's being put out there as of right now. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm not saying that's what I specifically want to happen. And if you disagree and want him fired, that's well within your right. And I completely understand. Because, again, 75% of the results in his time here at South Carolina have been largely disappointing. Well under 500 in SEC play, not even close to the tournament in 3 out of 4 years. And as a Gamecock fan, I can understand why you wouldn't want to run that back again, regardless of what resources they may be able to throw out at him. But, again, the thinking right now is that he'll be back. And that's the assumption that we're operating under until we hear something different. How soon after the season does Jeremiah Donati address this? I would hope pretty quickly, assuming that Carolina gets bounced next week in the first round of the SEC tournament. I hope by next Friday we have an answer on something. If you're going to bring him back, say it. If you're going to fire him, do it. But we don't need to string this along any longer. Because, again, it's been agonizing just waiting for these last basically month of the season to end so we can get to some kind of decision. Because, again, this season was over weeks ago at this point, and we're all anxious to see what Donati says. And ultimately, if you are bringing him back, what's the plan, right? You're not going to give us number figures. We know that. But, like, how are you going to go about making this better and giving him the resources that you think he might need to be more successful? I don't know. It's certainly not been fun to watch here as of late, but we've dubbed this the year of Jeremiah Donati, and that first decision is coming up here in about a week's time when it comes to what you're going to do about men's basketball going forward. Because Jack is out at spring practice, we're shuffling things around a little bit. Normally we do this at the end of the second hour, but Jen Jensen going to join me on the other side. We're going to talk some racing real quick to wrap up hour number one. We'll get back into the football conversation coming up in hour number two, as well as talk some Gamecock baseball as well. But the latest in NASCAR coming up on the other side with Jen Jensen from the early game as the Extra Point rolls on here on the game.
Well, they said this could not be done. Winning the first 3 races of a NASCAR season. No one has ever done it. Not since 1949. It happens today. Three-peat for Tyler Reddick. 23-11 in Toyota.
Yeah, guys, great work.
Welcome back in. Extra Points. Tyler Head along with you, wrapping up hour number one here on your Wednesday on the game. That was a call on Fox Sports on Sunday. Mike Joy calling Tyler Reddick across the line at Circuit of the Americas for, yes, an unprecedented third straight win to start a season. Jen Jensen from the early game joining me now on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. I mean, it's Tyler Reddick's world, and we're all just kind of living in it right now, it seems like.
Man, his and Michael Jordan's for sure. I would not have put money on that, thinking that he could possibly win a third race in a row, and especially when you've got SVG right there. You know, you kind of expected that to be the dominance, but even Ben Gisbergen said, hey, he ran a flawless race. Well, and he had to be perfect because, again, SVG is maybe the best road racer in the world right now, certainly in the NASCAR space. And funny enough, Circuit of the Americas has given him trouble these past couple of years in terms of not being able to get to victory lane, but he was right there in his tire tracks, and he gave him everything that he could. But Reddick quite literally never put a wheel out of place in the late stages of that race, which is what it takes to beat SVG. And funny enough, this is the first ever
track that he's won for a second time at now. His first win at 2311 was a couple seasons ago at Circuit of the Americas, and now he's able to go back to victory lane for a second time and just continue on what's been an incredible start to the season.
Yeah, it's really been something, and for coming off of a season that maybe wasn't so good, and again the personal struggles that he had, this is just it has to be. He's probably pinching himself quite a bit, and again now Michael Jordan has to go to the race in Phoenix because so far every race he's been at, Reddick's won, so he's kind of the lucky charm at least to this point.
And Jamie Little of Fox Sports has become his personal interviewer during and after each and every one of these races, and he's as giddy as ever to talk to her because obviously they're having incredible success. And don't forget, Bubba Wallace continues to run second in points. He had an 11th place finish on Sunday, so the team as a whole is off to a great start this year.
Well, yeah, when you look at the teams and look at the point standings, to this point, it's 23-11 has 2 people in the top 10. Spire has 3. Like, the beginning of the season has just been very unusual. Hendrick only has 1 driver in the top 10 right now, so it's been fun to see so far how things have played out. And to see that Bubba and Reddick at the top, that's incredible for 23-11.
Yeah, it certainly is. And again, it's a long regular season before we get into the chase, so all this is going to change around and move around quite a lot, but it is interesting to see some of these names towards the top of the point standings, and we'll see if they can sustain that over the course of now the next 23 races before we have the cutoff for the chase and all that. One guy that I think we were all interested in seeing how he performed on Sunday was Connor Zilisch, who is a very accomplished road racer himself. I don't think anybody passed more cars than he did on Sunday because he started towards the back, drove his way up to the front, gets spun on a restart, drives his way back to the front once again. In the final restart, gets spun yet again and drives his way all the way up to finish 14th, but that was not indicative of how good of a car he had.
No, I mean, there were times where you thought, you know what, he could be in contention for this. And the fact, like you said, that he did battle back the way he did and as many cars as he passed all day, he's just proving that once again he is good on road courses. He is going to be a contender.
Yeah, no, he's gonna get his if he gets to victory lane at some point this year. I would not be the least bit surprised by it, but he's dug himself into a pretty significant points hole so far to start this year because he got caught up in wrecks in the first couple of races of the year. So for him, because he's 32nd in points as of right now. Yes, winning, that's great, and that would obviously be a big jump in points if you're able to do that, but he's got to focus on consistency. He's got to get stage points. He's got to, try and finish as well as he can in each and every race because that's the new name of the game now with this new point structure that we've got. Yeah,
and we're all being reminded of that because when you look and see where some of the people that you would expect to see up in the top 10 and the Larsons of the world and everything and the Byrons and stuff, it's to see right now Hocevar sitting 10th in points. He's been consistent, really, for the most part. Consistency is going to, as we see, consistency is going to be the name of the game. And I do think Zilisch is going to have a good rookie season. I think there's no question that he'll shine and really prove his worth in the Cup Series this year.
We head to some normal racetracks now going forward. A Phoenix this upcoming weekend. Vegas will be at Darlington coming up here in a couple weeks as well, which we're certainly looking forward to. And now this is kind of the point where you settle into the season a little bit. Again, Daytona, Atlanta are drafting tracks where there's chaos and wrecks and all that kind of stuff. A road course is something that's a little more specialized, but now we're going to get into the grind of kind of week to week who the consistent contenders are going to be, starting with Phoenix this upcoming weekend.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that things will shake out a little bit more because, like you said, the teams are going to have a chance to get into some type of a rhythm instead of the kind of the flashy courses of sorts. And I think that the next few weeks will kind of show us a little bit more of how the season is going to unfold.
Yeah, and again, as you get into the more high-speed tracks like Vegas and Darlington coming up in a couple weeks as well, it'll tell you who's got the power. It'll tell you who's got the best combination with downforce and all that kind of stuff. And as we get into the late spring into the summer months, who's probably going to be your teams that you're really looking like true championship contenders. And I expect Tyler Reddick to be right there in the mix of that because 23-11 is always consistent. But he's certainly built himself up a nice lead, and he's got a mulligan or two if he needs it.
Yeah, no, he's got a lot of breathing room right now, and yeah, as the season continues, I'm anxious to see like the new horsepower package on the short tracks. I think that's going to be fun to watch. The one thing I would love to see, let's figure out why all these cool suits are malfunctioning because we've got, when you have drivers dropping out literally during the middle of a race, that's not good.
Yeah, well, it's only going to get hotter from here. I think it was 80 degrees on Sunday out there in Austin, so that is pales in comparison to what some of these summer races are going to be later on this year.
Yep. No, it's a little bit concerning, and I know there's some issues that they've been finding. So hopefully they can get all that fixed. Because I don't think it helps anybody to have boiling water surrounding your torso during a race.
Well, they'll be in action this weekend in Phoenix, doubleheader with IndyCar, which is pretty cool. IndyCar will be running their 250 miler on Saturday. Alex Palou getting the win to open up the season at St. Petersburg, and cool to see both series in action at the same track this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be a great weekend. I'm looking forward to it.
We'll talk about it next week, Jen, and look ahead to Las Vegas after that.
Sounds great. I appreciate it, Tyler.
It is the Extra Point. We'll get back into the football conversation. Coming up next is Coach Beamer spoke about the Kendall Briles offense as well as the Norris Sellers role as we go through spring practice as well. That's up next in hour number 2 of the Extra Point here in the game.
Are you a small business owner, a church, or other entity in need of a new HVAC system? Well, AAA Heating and Air has exciting news for you then. AAA now offers financing to qualified organizations to aid them in installing a new light commercial HVAC system. It's as easy as calling AAA Heating and Air for a quote or finding them online at callAAAtoday.com. Tell them Jack from 107.5 The Game sent you. At AAA Heating and Air, they've got your back. They're offering up to 12-month payment plans on repairs with no credit check required. That's right. No need to worry about your credit score in this case. As long as you're a homeowner with a valid bank account, you'll be good to go. So take control of your comfort today by giving a call to AAA Heating and Air at 803-677-1500. Again, the number to call AAA is 803-677-1500. Give them a call today and breathe easy again.
welcome back in. Hour number 2, it is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Wednesday on the Game. Jack has told me it looks like we'll be out there for an extended period of time for practice, so we'll hopefully get him back in here closer to the bottom of the hour, but hopefully he'll bring in some good updates and insight from what he's able to see out there at spring practice. But we got plenty of things to talk about in the meantime while we wait on Jack to get back over here. And again, we talked about men's basketball in that last hour. We'll get into baseball coming up here in just a couple of minutes. It's not been a fun, past 15 months going back to when South Carolina beat Clemson at the end of the 2024 season, for men's sports at least, because Don Staley's team made a Final Four last year. Looks like they're well on the way to doing that, hopefully again this year. Softball had a great season last year, and hopefully that's going to be the case this year as well. But men's sports have almost given you nothing to hang your hat on. Really, actually nothing to hang your hat on in that time since. I do wonder if any of you perhaps sold your soul to the devil or something to win that Clemson game, or maybe made some promises as the Gamecocks were driving down the field, or when Clemson was driving down to try and tie or win the game at the very end prior to Demetrius Knight's game-sealing interception that maybe are the reason why we're in the situation that we're in now with Gamecock Sports. If you want to admit to any of that, feel free. You can hit us up on the Firehouse Subs text line, but certainly a lot of things have gone wrong, and you've probably seen the stat floating around from inside the Gamecocks the other day on Twitter where since January 1st of 2025, Gamecock men's basketball, football, and baseball have combined for 88, now 89 when you count the Tennessee game last night for men's basketball against Power Conference competition. Their record is now 15-74, and that SEC record is 9-51. So, again, not a whole lot of good has happened in basically the last 15 or so months for Gamecock men's sports. And baseball, still to be determined, but you're not feeling great about it right now. We'll get into what happened in last night's game coming up here in just a moment. But I think everybody is really kind of turning their attention to football as the reason for optimism, right? As the reason to maybe see things turning in the right direction. Again, we got a long off season, 180 some odd days before we finally get into that football season. But that's where I think a lot of people's hopes lie, which is why there's so much pressure on Beamer and staff going into this year to make things better. And Beamer's well aware of that. And look, when you look at hot seat projections and all that kind of stuff, Beamer finds himself on pretty much all of them. Adam Rittenberg of ESPN put up his latest hot seat projections the other day, and he had Beamer on there. Now, it was interesting because he had it in the category of we want this to work in reference to Coach Beamer. Also in that same category is Bill O'Brien at Boston College, because everybody likes Beamer, right? I don't know anybody in this fan base that's like anti-Beamer, right? But at some point, because he wants to be here, he talks about how much he loves South Carolina, has the affinity for the program going back to his time here as assistant. Like, he's a coach that has embraced being a part of Columbia, that's embraced being a South Carolina guy. And you want to see that guy have success. But at some point, the results on the field do matter. And the past two seasons, or the two of the past three seasons, have been unacceptable. Missing bowl games, never acceptable at a place like South Carolina. Shouldn't be, right? Especially when you were nearly in the college football playoff 2 seasons ago. So a lot of pressure coming into this year for Beamer and company to get the ship righted. And they're well aware of that. And that's why so much change in this offseason, because there was so much that needed to be fixed with this team, starting, of course, with the offense. And for anybody that may have had concerns or questions about, other things from the past couple of offenses carrying over, Beamer put that in bed yesterday by saying, no, this is truly Kendall Briles' offense and completely his system.
I would say more than anything, it's I don't want to say scrapped, but it's his system. And just like with Smiley, Coach Smiley coming in to coach special teams, when you can take some things and carry over where it's not as much learning for the players, great. That's easier said than done sometimes. So there's certain things that, Coach Smiley likes to call things that I say, no, we've been calling it this way for 5 years, and I don't want to change now. If there's something like that I feel strongly about with Kendall or Coach Smiley, I'll talk about it. But for the most part, it's all new. It's his system. Hopefully it's even better for the players to be able to learn and retain the information. And as far as how involved I am, I believe in hiring good coaches and letting them coach. So, I'm kept up to speed on what our guys are teaching and doing each and every day, and well aware of that and on board with everything.
Sounds good to me. That's exactly what I want to hear, and probably for most of you out there as well. Any inkling of the Mike Shula offense should have been burned in a big fire as soon as the season ended, right? There shouldn't, even terms and phrases, right, should be all brand new when it comes to the Kendall Briles offense, because there was nothing to take from last year's offense. It's like, well, this was okay. Like, no, it was bad. Bad across the board. There's a reason they were 100+ in most every statistical category in college football last year. We're looking at this year as a refreshing, right? And there's a reason why everybody's excited. There's a reason why this hire created so much buzz, because this is exactly what people have been wanting for years now, right? And look, Dow Loggins' offense wasn't as bad as Mike Shula's was. In fact, it looked leaps and bounds better when you compare them, but it still wasn't like the most electrifying or one that was setting the world on fire, save for the last handful of games in the 2024 season. Even then, it still had its issues, but this is a reason for optimism, because you've got a college-centric offense. Kendall Briles has no experience in the NFL, which, again, was something people were worried about when Beamer was making this hire. No NFL experience for Kendall Briles. He is purely a college guy through and through, came up with his dad, learned that offensive system and all that. This is a college type of offense, and it's nothing like the past ones. And, it is a bummer that we don't get a spring game this year, because it's vanilla as it would have been. I would have been at least interested to see even the basic concepts of this offense in action, but we'll obviously have to wait until the season rolls around to see in action. But yeah, I'm very excited to see what that is ultimately. Gamer tries to interrupt me here. Awesome. There we go. Sorry about that. I'm very excited to see it in action and hopefully see LaNorris Sellers thrive in it, right? Because you have a small window in college football, college sports in general, with exceptional talents, which we believe LaNorris Sellers is. And it felt like last year was a wasted year because he regressed in a lot of ways. And the job of Kendall Briles, as well as the other assistants on the offensive staff, is getting him back to being where he was, if not better, than 2 seasons ago when we talked about him as a potential Heisman candidate and first-round pick and all that kind of stuff. That guy's still in there. That talent didn't go away. It just was not maximized a season ago under Mike Shula, and we're hoping that the Kendall Briles offense is able to bring that out of him. So what is LaNorris Sellers' role, and how is he going to be adapting to a new offense during spring practice and during this offseason? That's something else that Coach Beamer talked about yesterday as well.
Yeah, one, I think it'll be good for him as he goes into professional football when his college days are over, because more likely than not, he's not going to be in the same offensive system during his NFL career. So being able to learn multiple systems, being able to, hear, it's not like we have a lot of new concepts. Maybe what we called it in 24 or taught in 24 by the quarterback's coach was different by the quarterback's coach in 25, and maybe the verbiage and how Kendall's teaching it is different in 2026. But I think there's a lot of positives and benefits that will certainly come from it with LaNorris, and he's I don't want to get into his business, but he's a football junkie. I mean, he likes football and enjoys the game and spends a lot of time watching football, studying football, watching other teams and things like that. So as a guy that enjoys football like he does, I think this is just another opportunity to really kind of jump into a system and learn a different way of doing some things, and that hopefully will make him and our football team better in the end.
I will say, Coach Beamer, be careful about mentioning, preparing him for the NFL. People don't care about that here. people don't care what his career is going to be at the next level. We want him to have success when he gets to that point, but it's all about what he's doing in a Gamecock uniform and what likely is going to be his final year in college. And again, it's good that Sellers is a football junkie. He unfortunately has been put in position in each of the last couple of years where he's had to learn a completely new offensive system or new verbiage or whatever it may be because the offense coordinator changed. Now, it was the same from 23 to 24 with Dow Loggins, but he went from being a backup to being the starter, so there's a whole lot of things that he had to learn over the course of that 23 to 24 offseason by taking on that expanded role. And again, it was the case last year with Shula. And yeah, there was a lot of similarities, but still it's new person calling plays. So there was still a learning curve to some degree. And now you're bringing in a very much different type of offensive system with Kendall Briles that is going to be a learning process and all that kind of stuff. But he's a veteran, right? He's going into his third year as a starter. So there's a lot of college football that he's seen and experienced up to that point, which hopefully makes this a easier transition. Right. Again, the skill set and all that is something that is very high for Sellers, which gives us the belief that he's going to be able to fit within this system and be very successful. When you look at the concepts of what Kendall Briles has run in the past at places like TCU, at places like Arkansas, at places like Baylor, you can see how Lenore Sellers and that skill set can fit in and hopefully be extremely successful. He's going to have seemingly good complements around him. In terms of receivers, in terms of tight ends. We'll see how the running back room shakes out, as that's a little bit of a question mark right now in terms of how deep it's going to be, what your rotation is going to be, and all that. And, of course, you have the offensive line that's a little bit up in the air, given the injuries and all that. But Sellers, a couple years ago, was the fix-all for issues that you had offensively, mainly when it came to the offensive line for being able to duck out of trouble and all that kind of stuff. And it just kind of seemed like he was playing seamlessly. He wasn't really thinking about it, just going out there and being the exceptional athlete that he was compared to last year where we look at his struggles and it just kind of seemed like he was overthinking it, right? And I don't know if that was a hit in the confidence or what, or if it was just things became too complex for him. Whatever it may be, you hope that is gone out the door with Mike Shula as well. And I don't know how much of a confidence rebuilder he needs, but that's something that Kendall Briles could also be tasked with this offseason of, hey, like you're a dude, man. We saw that for you at the end of the 2024 season. We know what you're capable of, and we're going to put you in this Kendall Briles offensive system to maximize that once again. Again, we all have to take everything with a grain of salt over the next couple weeks and months when it comes to reports we're hearing out of practice and workouts and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be a wait and see until the season gets here, like everything else is with this team. But we have proof of concept in terms of seeing how good Sellers can be, and we're hoping this upcoming season he returns to that form once the season gets rolling. So, again, it's always going to be a focal point when I talk about quarterback in an off season, but especially as you get him adapted to a new offensive system once again with Kendall Briles taking over as the OC. Jack Veltri has informed me he's on his way back from spring practice, so we'll hopefully get him back in here in the next 10 or 15 minutes or so. But up next, we'll get into what happened for Gamecock baseball last night over at Founders Park as the Extra Point rolls along. Tyler Head along with you here on your Wednesday on the Game.
All right, everybody, let's tell you about our presenting sponsor here on the Garnet Trust Hour. It's our friends over at Krantz Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing. KrantzCooling.com, Krantz, cooling with a K.com. If You've heard us talk about them here on the program every single week. HVAC service, local, reliable for your home or your business. Repair, maintenance, and installation. They've been out to my home for new installations, for maintenance, for repairs. They've been out to Wes's home, too. You can trust Justin Krantz and his local family-owned business since 1983. They've been helping Midlands families and businesses with any of their HVAC needs. We're excited to say now they've added plumbing to the business. So whether you have heating needs, air quality for your indoor spaces, or plumbing needs now, 803-672-3224 or KrantzCooling.com. Give them a call today for any of your heating, cooling, plumbing needs.
And welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler head along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Last night, very busy night across Gamecock sports. Men's basketball in action as well as Gamecock baseball. And unlike the basketball team, baseball did pick up a win last night. A pretty convincing one, too. 12-3 over USC Upstate as South Carolina rebounds in a way after the series loss to Clemson over the weekend. This game was tied. They're going into the bottom of the sixth, but South Carolina explodes for 5 runs in the bottom of the sixth, 3 more in the seventh to almost pull off the run roll. They would have had 1 more run there in the bottom of the eighth. Could have done that, but regardless, a win is a win. And Coach Mainieri last night after the game talked about how good it just felt to get a win after a tough weekend against the team in the Upstate.
Well, honestly, I'm not thinking about SEC play yet. We've got 5 more games before we play down in Florida, and this is such a humbling sport. I've learned that over a long career. These young kids, they don't understand it until they get their nose bloodied. You take somebody lightly, they're going to beat you. Any of these 5 games we had this week, we could get beat. This team. You saw the numbers this pitcher had before this game, and we did a good job against him. He kept us off balance there for 3 or 4 innings. After the first inning, he did a good job, and then we finally got to him again. We've lost some games that we probably would love to have back, and so I don't want the kids looking beyond the very next challenge. And the very next challenge is a really tough one. Charleston Southern, what are they, 10-1 or 11-1 or something like that, right? So, and listen, 2 games in 1 week, it's going to tax your midweek pitching. And we don't have a lot of arms left down there in the bullpen, so we're going to have to play a really good game tomorrow. We're going to be sitting in here after the game talking about something we don't really want to have to talk about. So I don't want them really looking ahead. I understand why you asked the question, but the way that you build momentum, the way you build confidence is by taking it 1 game at a time. I think the kids are proud of the way they bounced back tonight. And we had more hits tonight than we had the whole weekend against Clemson. Of course, the quality of the pitching isn't what, Clemson's got one of the best pitching staffs in the country. So, but we needed to do the job tonight, and we did. And I'm glad for the kids. They felt good. They had fun. And now we need to come out tomorrow and play with the same intensity.
There's something about these kind of games, kind of similarly to where, we look at in like football, when Carolina plays a Coastal or a Furman or a Wofford or whatever it may be, of handling your business, right? You're supposed to win these games a certain way, and winning 12-3 is like, yeah, that's kind of how you're supposed to beat a team like USC Upstate. And last night, you got a lot of really good performances at the plate from guys like Patrick Evans, who got moved into the leadoff spot as Will Craddock was dealing with the injury from over the weekend. We'll get to Palmineri's comments there coming up in a second. But Patrick Evans leads things off last night, goes 4 of 5 with 3 RBIs and 2 home runs, including one there in the bottom of the 8th that gave South Carolina at that point in time the 12-3 lead. Scobie had a good night, 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs. Logan Sutter is coming on pretty strong as of late when he's getting his opportunities with 3 RBIs and 1 home run himself. Jamison drove in a run. Harmon drove in a couple runs. So you got good production up and down your lineup last night, which is good to see. And obviously, again, against a team like Upstate, that's what the expectation is of how you're supposed to beat those kind of teams. Real quick, do want to give the update on what Palmineri had to say about Will Craddock as well, who's not available last night.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I didn't sleep well Sunday night. I really thought he had fractured his hand. He had gotten hit right here on the 5th metacarpal, and unfortunately I experienced that as a player once myself and broke my hand when I got hit by a pitch there, and it was really sore. But we x-rayed it on Monday when we got back, and thank goodness it was a negative x-ray, so there's no fracture. He just had a bad bruise on his hand. But that's not why he didn't play tonight. He's actually under the weather. He wasn't even at the ballpark today because he's been under the weather. He actually wasn't feeling great. I didn't even know that he wasn't feeling good all weekend, and it just took a turn for the worse. And so he's at home recuperating, and hopefully he'll be back soon.
Yeah, and we'll see. I would imagine if he wasn't feeling good enough to play last night, he's probably not going to be good enough to go tonight against Charleston Southern, which, by the way, pregame coverage starts at 6:15 for a 6:30 first pitch, which you can listen to right here on 107.5 The Game, as well as 100.3 The Game out in Myrtle Beach. Again, that's the second of the 5 games that South Carolina has in this week alone, and the second of the 6 games they have before conference play starts coming up the end of the next week, as they'll head on the road to take on Florida. And you heard Maneri allude to it there in the cut-up plate a moment ago, that he's not thinking about Florida or SEC play or anything like that, which that's good coach speak, because, of course, you're supposed to focus on the task at hand and what's ahead. But most of this fan base is, right? Like, the Clemson series, as I talk about a lot, was the litmus test to give you an idea of how you're going to fare in conference play. And outside of career performance by Josh Gunther and a great closeout by, Alex Valentin, you didn't have a whole lot of things go your way this past weekend. Again, 4 total hits in each of the 3 games, not enough to get it done. Obviously, your totality of pitching did not match up to what Clemson had over the weekend, which if you can't hit the ball and you can't pitch consistently over 3 days, you're not going to win very many series in SEC play, right? And that's kind of the funny thing about this next week or so is there's really nothing that Carolina can do against Upstate, against Charleston Southern tonight, against Princeton this weekend, against Citadel in the midweek next week. And as Maneri mentioned, Citadel is a good team. They're 10-1. Their only loss is a 1-run loss in a high-scoring game against UNC Wilmington in a midweek game. But regardless of if you beat them 5-0 or 50-0, nothing about these performances in the next 5 games is going to ease people's concerns heading into conference play against Florida at the end of next week. Like, that is its own difficult level of challenge stepping up that everybody's going to continue to reference the Clemson series as your best idea of how you stack up against teams like that. And as you get into the first couple weeks conference play, we're going to find out real quick if anything did change between the Clemson series and then, as, again, it seems like it's going to be an uphill battle for South Carolina once again in conference play. But as Jack finally gets in studio here, for the sake of last night, you can at least feel good about the fact that you won a game, got yourself back in the winning category after 2 tough losses to Clemson this past weekend. And, again, what's that worth to the fan base? Probably not a whole lot for the team. They can at least feel good about that.
Hello, Tyler.
How's it going?
Good, man. Good. I told you about 10:30.
Yeah,
so,
you're a couple minutes ahead of schedule.
A little later than we anticipated. We'll talk more about football, I'm sure, coming up in the next 30 minutes. But, yeah, baseball, look, nice win last night. I don't know what you have not talked about and have talked about, but nice win last night. It was 3-3, bottom of the 6th. You outscore USC Upstate 9-0 the rest of the way. You win the game how you're supposed to. Wasn't always pretty, but look, you won the game. And like you said, I agree. The next 5 games are super, super important. You go undefeated these next 5 games. You're 13-5 heading into conference play next week against Florida. It's not amazing, but look, it's like 2 games off the pace of where you were last year, I think, at this time. So overall, I think it's okay. And if you're also getting close to, blowing teams out, run ruling them the rest of the way before conference play, I think you feel really good. Like you're getting the offense going, which I think is the biggest thing to watch for these next few games.
Again, the fan base wants to see that proof of concept against good teams, which I understand. So, again, what you do in the next 5 games, I don't think it's going to change people's opinions overall about this program. It's like, all right, get down to Gainesville next week, start doing some things differently there, and then we'll talk about this season looking better. Because, unfortunately, much like Colonial Life Arena was last night, as I talked about while you were away at practice, Fountains Park kind of a ghost town last night. Not a ton of fan support for that one.
No, and basketball was really bad last night. For senior night, look, I think these fans have just shown that they really interest in going, and that's the unfortunate part for 2 of your biggest sports at South Carolina. So that's something that needs to desperately change moving forward. And how do you do that? You start winning games.
We'll get into some more baseball stuff coming up later on the hour. But since Jack is back, what has happened so far at spring practice this morning? We will get into it on the other side. It is the Extra Point, Tyler Head and Jack Feltry with you on your Wednesday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Veltri with you on your Wednesday here on the game. We'll get into the latest on spring practice in just a moment, but it is time for Who Sprung a Leak. Brought to you by our friends over at American Leak Detection. Jack, if I told you that I was going to pay you $15 million over the course of the next year, the only caveat being don't do anything illegal, certainly nothing legal within the realms of your own job, could you do that for me? Do you think you could be able to stay on the straight and narrow for $15 million?
Shoot, man, you could pay me $10,000 and I'll definitely keep a straight line. I will be squeaky clean for as long as you need me to be.
Well, I'm glad you can do that because apparently Jurickson Profar cannot. If that name sounds familiar to you, if you're not a Braves fan, it's because you probably heard about last year, where about 3 games into the year, he got popped for performance-enhancing drugs, which forced him to miss basically half the season, 80-game suspension for a first-time offender in Major League Baseball. Came back. The Braves season was kind of done at that point. But he knew, hey, I got in trouble for this. I should probably not do this again. Well, as we close in on the start of the Major League Baseball season coming up here in a couple weeks, Jurickson Profar once again has been popped for PEDs, where now, as a second-time offender, he'll be forced to miss the entire season and forfeit his entire salary this year.
It's deservedly so, right? Like, that would have been real ugly if the Braves were still on the hook to pay this guy, which glad they aren't. It should never be the case where a team has to pay a player for doing something that is clearly against the rules. And now he's a second-time offender. I mean, he's tarnished his baseball career at this point. I mean, this guy used to be, I believe he used to be a top prospect. He was either the top prospect or one of the top prospects when he was coming up years ago with the Texas Rangers. And look, he's had some nice seasons. He was doing really well with the San Diego Padres, and then the Braves signed him. And, I mean, it's turned out to be a really disaster kind of move, honestly. I mean, he was okay last year in 80 games, but we got to remember, he got popped for PEDs last year. So, yeah, it's just not ideal for the Braves, I'm sure. And I'm sure it's frustrating for you, especially, Tyler.
Yeah, no doubt. And he's got one more year on his contract in 2027. But by the end of this season, he'll have been able to have played in a fourth of the total games you could have had him for.
I mean, that's just really disappointing. So it's turned out to be a massive mistake signing him. And look, I think Braves fans want to see, Alex Anthopoulos bring in more pitching, right? But they sign guys like this, and it's not their fault necessarily because Profar was one of the better bats in the market in free agency 2 years ago. But the problem is that it's bad luck because this guy can't stay out of trouble with the roids, man. Like, why do you need them? What the roids are not going to turn you into Barry Bonds, I promise.
Well, and look, there's a lot of caveats and things that can show up certain ways in PED tests that guys have gotten in trouble for. So if you want to give him the benefit of the doubt for what he did last year, saying, okay, well, maybe, because that's the excuse, right? Is, I didn't know. I took this, didn't know it'd show up this way. If you want to give him the benefit of the doubt for that last year, okay, fine. Doing it a second time, I'm sorry, man. There's no excuse for that. You're just dumb at this point.
No, I felt the same way about a guy like Robinson Cano years ago, where I'm just like, I was shell-shocked. Like, he hadn't played for the Yankees in a while, but I was shell-shocked. Like, this guy's doing PEDs. He's on his way to the Hall of Fame. And then he gets popped the second time, and it's like, come on, dude. Like, it's the same thing with A-Rod and all these other guys that they come clean, they're sorry, they deny they do it at first, and then it's like, come on, man. Like, you're a multi-time offender of this rule. I mean, you deserve not to play baseball again at that point, but here we are.
Well, if you're a Braves fan looking to watch Jurickson Profar this year, got bad news for you. He also can't compete for Curacao in the World Baseball Classic either now.
How many Braves fans are like, oh, man, I'm going to watch Jurickson Profar this year? Like, you have so many other options on that team. It's a big loss because what position is he playing for the Braves right now?
I believe he's going to DH this year.
That's an easy position to replace. It's not like he's a position player, right? I mean, he can play I think he can play the infield and outfield if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, DH, just fill the void with somebody else. So
there you go. There's your Who Sprung a Leak. That being Jurickson Profar, who's going to be sitting on his couch watching a lot of baseball this year and getting paid $0 to do so. Getting back into the football conversation, you literally just came over from the practice facility. What does Jack Veltri have to report from day one?
we actually saw more than I was anticipating. I think that will be the general consensus from today. Of course, we saw stretching for about 10 minutes, but then we get out to the practice field, and I think it was about 10 more minutes after that with 5-minute periods apiece. And boy, they got right into it. They were not messing around. They just got straight into work. Saw a lot of positional work, quarterbacks throwing to the wide receivers and tight ends, and the offensive linemen working with Randy Clements and Jason Smith. Like, that was good to see. I think, and the big thing, and I don't have it here to show. I have a video of it to show you, but like I can't show it right now because we're on air. But let me describe it the best I can. They were doing some drills to stay low. The offensive linemen were, because you need to stay low in order to go ahead and block the man you're going up against. So that they were doing some drills that looked different than what we've seen in the past with South Carolina's offensive line. So that was an immediate difference right there. Just some of the drills the O-line were doing was the main difference. I was mainly watching the skill, like basically the offense was on one side of the field, defense was on another. I had one of our newer interns with us helping video, which we're going to have a sights and sounds from spring practice up on our YouTube on Gamecock Central. So that'll be up later on this afternoon if you want to check out some stuff. And I have some videos on my Twitter as well to showcase what I'm talking about right now as well if you're more of a visual type of person. But yeah, I think we saw a lot, and it was good to see. Quarterbacks are wearing black jerseys now, no more green jerseys. So that was something different. Jalen Kilgore was out there, and he's getting ready for the NFL draft and pro day here soon. So that's exciting for him. But yeah, man, it was good to be back out there. Coach Doty was out there. I mean, we saw a lot of different things.
You sure he wasn't gonna try and suit up and be the fourth quarterback or something?
He had the like the black leggings on underneath his shorts, so I think he was definitely like, if they need an emergency quarterback to go throw out there or something, he's ready. But yeah, it was good seeing him out there and everyone else. And look, there's a lot of new with this team. I saw Kendall Briles out there working with these guys. Stan Drayton was very involved working with the running backs and whatnot with the what do they call it's not the medicine ball, but it's the big bouncy rubber ball.
Like a yoga ball.
Yeah, yoga ball. Yeah, he was really working with those guys on I don't know the best. Again, I'm on video right now, so I could the people watching on our YouTube can see me, but they're cutting around the ball, working with him on that with the wide receivers, quarterbacks, and running backs. So. Yeah. These guys are very involved in practice, which is good to see.
Yeah, I'm watching the video now. I'm assuming it's like a balance type of thing because you are kind of making a sharp cut around there.
Sharp cut is essentially what it looked like.
Whenever you get a chance to talk to Stan Drayton, maybe that's a question you can ask of, hey, what exactly is that drill supposed to accomplish? But good to see. Any takeaways from the coaching styles of any of the new guys you were able to pick up on?
I really was impressed with the few minutes that I watched of Clements and Jason Smith working with the offensive line. Not to talk bad. I'm not talking down to any of the other offensive line coaches, but it just felt and looked different, looked more involved, and like these guys really, really know what they're doing, and it was different, right? It had a different feel to it with some of the drills that the offensive line was doing. So good to see on that end, because that's a banged up group right now. Like we talked about when I was on here earlier with you this morning, it is a banged up group right now with Josiah out, Peak out for right now. Hopefully they can stay healthy the rest of the spring and heading into the fall camp here in August. But yeah, it was good to see that group getting a lot of solid work in.
Most importantly, nobody got injured, right? Where everybody's healthy from what you saw.
Yeah, so far. And we are going to hear from some of the players, I guess, after practice around noon. So I'll be right back over at the football facility. And about as soon as I get off the air at 11, I know you'll still be here, but yeah, as soon as I get off, I'm probably heading back over there and getting ready to. I don't know who we're going to talk to today. I'm sure we'll talk to some older guys that have been here, but definitely I think the spring, the big thing about the spring is getting to really learn about the new guys, I think. And I mentioned that this morning as what is my biggest thing I'm watching for. This will be the case for me really all spring, is watching the new guys and seeing what they're all doing. So, I mean, there's some big guys out there, man. There was one guy. I need to have the roster. I don't have my roster up in front of me.
So we got to learn who's what number now.
I know. There was one guy, number 4, not Vakari Swain, on offense. I don't know who it was. I'm pulling up the roster right now, but there was some guy. I think he's a wide receiver working with those skill guys. He just looked massive. So pulling up the roster right now. But yeah, overall, really good to see these guys out there waiting for the roster to load. But number 4. I know
number 4.
I left my paper roster in the car, of course. So as the internet's being a little slow this morning.
I'm showing Augustive is still number 4 for offense.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Unless somebody else is wearing that jersey.
No. It looked like it was him. I mean, that's 6'1", 215. I don't know, man. For some reason, I might have it on video, but like he looked. No, I guess it was Augustive. Just looked very big. I thought it was a wide receiver at first, but maybe it was him. It looks like he's made some big strides in the weight room. But again, Shane talked about it yesterday. He's been so impressed with the strides that these guys have made. Because normally we see the before and after pictures during the summer leading into fall camp, and that's usually when the big improvements are made. But, man, January and February, some of these guys have really looked like they've gotten a lot bigger, and that's a great sign here heading into spring ball.
Yeah, hopefully so. So there's your update from spring practice this morning. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the hour. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri on the game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Felcher, wrapping up hour number 2 on your Wednesday here on the game. Reminder, Gamecock baseball back in action tonight as they take on Charleston Southern. Second straight midweek game this week. Pregame coverage starts at 6:15 for a 6:30 first pitch here on the game in Columbia, as well as 100.3 the game out in Myrtle Beach. That's also your next chance to win the the Crescent Construction Grand Slam contest. If Gamecock hitter goes yard, you can win all the cash in the pot that goes up by $25 each and every game. Sponsored by our friends at Crescent Construction. Go to 1075thegame.com and register if you're not already for the Crescent Construction Grand Slam contest. And that'll just be another area where Jack is getting jerked in a different direction as you've been here, there, and everywhere in the past 24 hours, it seems like.
Man, I know. I really haven't got. I wish I was here earlier because we could have talked like basketball, baseball. Like, there's a lot. I like days like this where we do have a lot going on. Like, it's crazy. Don't get me wrong. Like, I was at basketball last night, and then I even thought like, maybe I'll get over to baseball, but I didn't have a credential on me, so I was like, forget it. But
at this point, they just should be able to let you in, right?
I would hope. I would have. I would really like that. Like, just give us a season-long like credential. I know some places do that, where they just give you the credential at the beginning of the year and you just wear it in and all that. That would have been nice. I could have realistically made it over last night, like before all the run scoring exploded out there. But yeah, look, tough loss last night for hoops. The crowd, as we talked about, was abysmal. Not really a surprise. I can't blame this fan base one bit at all. And that I think it's a little bit more jarring because it was senior night.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, everyone saw the pictures and the videos. I mean, like, there was nobody there last night. Like, there was this group of cheerleaders that were going to perform at halftime up in the upper deck. They were making more noise, and I would say they probably outdrew the amount of Gamecock fans that were sitting in the lower bowl during senior night. And there were probably more Tennessee fans. Like, it's not even apathy at this point. It's just people are finding different things to do, and they don't want to waste their time watching a program that they know is just going to lose. Like, why would you go to a game if you know your team's just going to lose, right? You can just watch on TV, listen on radio. Like, I think that's where things are at. And it's the same thing with baseball. I wasn't there last night, but I saw the pictures. The crowd looked no better than last week against Queens. It's just disappointing because it doesn't have to be like this, right? And I think the fans are really, there's this thing called voting with your wallet, and I think that's essentially what we're seeing here is these fans are done with the product that they're seeing on the court and on the field until things change. But here's the thing. There's no guarantee that things are going to change. I mean, there's buyouts and there's a lot of financial commitments that you got to make changes. And the only person that knows what's going to happen right now is probably Jeremiah Donati, and I'm sure he's really figuring that out right now. He saw him at spring practice today, and he was out there at senior night yesterday, so he's around.
Oh, listen, I don't think we doubt he's around. We just have not heard anything from him from a public standpoint in reference to, because I know he was at the State House for that stuff last week, but in reference to the future of specifically men's basketball, because that's the first decision coming up. And look, there's a very real possibility Carolina's season ends this time next week with the first round of the SEC tournament, and I would assume by next Friday we know whether Lamont Paris is staying or going or not. But you're right, last night's crowd was not acceptable by any means, and I don't know if you saw, but Mike Sharvjump's parents were there for
Did see that,
his final college game because he's played 4 years at 4 different schools, and I think about it because this is honestly something I'm going to kind of miss with Gamecock basketball going into next year. At least for like the first 80% of the year, every game they brought up the point about Mike Sharvjump's dad being a former Harlem Globetrotter, where they show the picture of him. They have stopped doing that in the past couple games, but of course brought it up last night, with him being in attendance there. But I think about a guy that was a Harlem Globetrotter that played all around the world, probably for sold-out arenas left and right. What do you think he was thinking being there last night with 20 people watching his son's final college game at home?
It was abysmal. I mean, it was real bad. And look, continuing on the trend of USC's poor promotion of men's basketball honorees and whatnot, which this one wasn't as bad as the others, but Devin Downey was honored during the game last night. He's honored during a media timeout, which we got a little bit of a heads up that was going to happen. So I think, the media.
There was a tweet about it.
Yes. So I think the media did a decent job of helping, promote that, because I think that's what it needs to be, is that promotion should be so easy. Just a simple tweet goes a long way. The problem, I think, last night, though, is that it was during a media timeout. Like, they ushered him off the floor before his introduction was even done. And it was just for his jersey being in the atrium at CLA. So it's not like he was getting his jersey retired. I asked him about that when we spoke to him during halftime. Like, would you like to see your jersey, hanging in the rafters someday? I think he totally deserves it. And, he was humble about it. He's like, I'm not the one that makes that decision, but it would be a really cool honor. So, I don't know. I mean, I just think it's a little silly that one of your best players is getting honored for 30 seconds during a media timeout. When you make a big deal about his jersey being out there, and then you're having a cheer squad, not South Carolina, like the little kids cheer squad from the upper deck that I was talking about, coming down performing at halftime. That's, I don't know. It just feels like the priorities aren't completely straight there. But then again, it's a step in the right direction after the debacle with Legends Weekend and the NIT team. So I'm not trying to bash anyone, but look, there needs to be a little bit more done to give these former players the recognition they deserve.
I just think he deserves to be honored in front of a better crowd than that. Like,
that too.
I know you may have had this planned
on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, maybe you push it to next year where you just can hope for better reception, better people there, because he deserves that, right? I mean, again, there was nobody there last night, and that's just it's a bad look all around.
To be fair, and he mentioned this last night for clarification, he was supposed to be here for the Kentucky game.
Okay.
But I believe he said he's coaching his daughter in basketball right now, so that took priority over the Kentucky game. So that was the plan. So it made sense. Like, in your head, it's like, why are they honoring him now instead of the Kentucky game last week? But that was the plan. So I can imagine it was definitely a better crowd for that Kentucky game, even though it was a lot of Big Blue Nation out there. So again, it's been a tough year for basketball. It doesn't help that the crowds aren't really there at all, but I respect them trying to honor the former players, but the way in which they're doing it can be so much better. Like, seriously.
Not a lot of things have gone right for men's basketball this year. One more regular season game Saturday against Ole Miss, and then SEC tournament next week, where, again, this time next week we'll be talking about decisions being made on the future of the program. Jack, you got to get back over to the football facility, so try and keep everything in line for the rest of the day. I know you're going to be busy.
Yeah, man. I'll see you tomorrow.
That's all right. Out at Griffin Pools and Spas, by the way. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour up next here on the game. 11 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Just Tyler and Chris today. Wes has things he's handling today, but he'll be back with us tomorrow, by the way, when we're out at Griffin Pools and Spas over in Lexington from 9 until noon. So be sure to come by and hang out and see us there. I don't know if we're going to be offering anything like giveaway-wise you have to jump in the pool for. We did that last year. I can't confirm or deny if we're going to do that again next year, but tomorrow. But hopefully we have some cool stuff to give away if you come by and see us.
Is it going to be nice tomorrow like it is today? Today's like 7. It's going to be like 73.
I think tomorrow is actually supposed to be better.
Even nicer, yeah. I don't know. You know, maybe they'll let us hop in.
Yeah, tomorrow's 77, cloudy, but still a little bit warmer today. So yeah, if you want to. By the way, you have a great selection of pools out there and hot tubs and all that kind of stuff. So yes, you can quite literally jump in if you feel led to. I would suggest to change clothes if you're going to do that. I don't know if you want to be sitting around in wet clothes during the rest of the show, but I don't know. Maybe we can present a challenge for the three of you while we're out there tomorrow to see who'd be willing to jump in to do something.
I wouldn't mind.
Have fun with it.
You get in the hot tub after.
Sure.
Yeah,
why not?
hot tub's there.
Absolutely. So that's coming up tomorrow. Again, we'll be out at Griffin Pools and Spas from 9 until noon out there in Lexington, just out by the dam. So come by and see us. Of course, today is the beginning of spring practice for South Carolina. Don't worry. We'll get into the news that we learned yesterday from Shane Beamer at the press conference. We're focusing on positives right now, though. Being happy, being excited, and great, obviously, to get out there and get to see what seemed like, according to Jack, quite a bit of stuff through the amount of time you guys were allotted this morning.
A good bit of stuff in that we were talking about that this week. There's so many new guys, you know, like that's the biggest thing. You know, day one, you're always, and Shane Beamer gave us an injury rundown, but you're kind of looking, okay, who is off to the side? Are there any new guys off to the side? Is there anybody missing that you were otherwise expecting? Honestly, man, it moves so fast. You're trying to look at so much that, you know, you leave the practice field. We get the stretch period in the indoor and then 3 periods outside. So we're out there, you know, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes, something like that total. You always leave, you know, I didn't see so-and-so. I didn't see so-and-so. But you can't, I mean, with 100 guys all spread out, you know, in the indoor and in the practice field, you can't exactly get a look at everybody. But we didn't see, first of all, biggest news, didn't get the depth chart drill.
Not that we were expecting that in day one. But
no, but we were hopeful. You know, I think
was Wes upset?
We didn't really talk about it. He might have been upset about it. You know, we said it was like a 2% chance. Maybe that was generous. Did not get to see it. So I can't tell you who's working with the ones on the O-line, who's working here. Like, I don't – we have some ideas about some guys, right? But we didn't get a look at that. We didn't see, you know, one-on-ones or a 7-on-7. We certainly didn't see any full team drills. It was a lot of – you know, you're out there, they're working ball security drills, they're working individual drills, they're doing some short throws, you know, quarterbacks working, things like that. So didn't see a whole lot from that standpoint. The biggest thing on day one, when they're in jersey, shorts, and helmets, you know, not a lot of hitting, no hitting. You're just kind of getting a look at new guys. Hey, what's Julian Walker look like? What's Jordan Thomas look like? What about Tomey? You know, what all these newcomers, like trying to get a sense of what they look like, trying to put eyes on them. That's the biggest thing. And so from that standpoint, you know, maybe there's some takeaways. I've had like 2 or 3 people since I left practice, which was like less than an hour ago, like, what you think? What'd they look like? You ready to say this or that? I'm like, yeah.
What's the record going to be this year?
Yeah. And most people say it joking because they know you absolutely cannot say that. But yeah, just getting a look at some of these new guys, transfers and freshmen.
You mentioned Noah Clark. You also mentioned Julian Walker in a comment on the forum that those guys definitely passed the eye test for freshmen.
You know, Noah Clark's huge. I remember, I think the first time I saw him was at an Under Armour camp when he was about to go into his senior year. And, I mean, it stands out. Saw him in person after that another time over the summer. You know, walking around campus. He came down when some of his teammates were participating in the camp down here. I mean, he's listed at, 6'5", 340, I think, something like that. Huge. I mean, just a huge kid. Really passes the eye test. And same for Julian Walker. You know, I've told this story so many times, but the first time we saw Julian Walker on campus probably 2 or 3 years ago hanging out around the program, he hadn't really hit the recruiting radar yet. he ended up hitting it in a big way. You're sitting there going, who is that? Is this some new transfer that they're sneaking in here last minute? No, that's Julian Walker. He's like a sophomore in high school, and he continued to get bigger and obviously progress on the field. So from just the eye test standpoint, he really stands out. He's another guy that's listed at 6'5", 6'6", 250. Looks every bit of it, and that's just one part of it, of course. But these guys are going to have the benefit of going through spring ball, which so many freshmen nowadays do. It's almost, you look at South Carolina's high school class. It used to be if you had 3 to 5 guys out of your class enroll early, you're like, wow, that'll be great for them. Now it's more common to enroll early. I mean, the majority of South Carolina's entire recruiting class, when you're counting transfers and high school guys, the high school guys, most of them are on campus except for a handful, so less than a handful. So those guys definitely look the part. Noah, one of the things that we heard about Noah, before even spring practice, was that for a guy his size, he has some twitch, which I think is pretty exciting because you're talking about a guy that you thought coming in like, hey, he needs to drop some weight, kind of optimize, reshape his body, and maybe that's still the case, but the fact that he can move at that size is, I think, pretty interesting. How much he plays in year one, I don't know, because there's some veterans in that room. Julian Walker, though, I think is a guy, Tyler, you look at and say, he's going to get a ton of opportunities this spring. That edge room right now in spring, and hopefully this isn't the case during the season, but we know in that edge room, Dylan Stewart's going to be limited. George Wilson's going to be limited. Kabisaki Pra's going to be limited. Quay Dodd's going to be limited, right? So, you're bringing in Julian. You're bringing in Drew Collins, who's Kelby Collins' brother, as a transfer. You got Anthony Addison. You've got Caleb Herring as a transfer. Like, you've got some guys in that room, but they're going to have to, I think, be cognizant and mindful throughout practice until the other guys get back full go, just with how they're splitting reps. But that means that, for a guy like Caleb Herring, who, yes, he's been around college ball in the SEC, but this is his first year in this program. It's his first year in this new defensive scheme. And for a young guy, a freshman, first-time college player in Julian Walker, it's going to be big for him, to get more and more reps throughout the spring.
I asked Jack about this when he came in the last hour, but this is also an opportunity to get to see a lot of these coaches in action for the first time. Randy Clements, Dan Drayton, Deion Barnes. Anything stand out to you about the way those guys conducted practices, the way they handled things from a coaching standpoint? Anything you can take away?
Yeah, not as much on day one just because of what we got to see. When we were leaving practice, the O-line was kind of close to the gate, and so you got to see kind of on the way out Clements, kind of talking to the players, instructing the players. He had the whole O-line over there with them doing some different drills and things like that. So not as much a sense on either of those guys quite yet. One thing that we have picked up, just independent of what we've seen in practice, is Deion Barnes a pretty no-nonsense guy. He's got, I think, a different personality than Sterling Lucas, but he's kind of all business. That's one of the things. I know Wes was over there talking to some of the transfers on the transfer media day. Yeah, that's really what stood out. Caleb Herring, who I just referenced, the edge transfer from Tennessee, of course, will be coached by Deion Barnes, and he really just pointed out, like, he's exactly what I was looking for, just like no nonsense. And I think that's really what they have up front. Travian Robertson's the same way. Travian Robertson came up, was recruited by and played under the late, great Brad Lawing, who was absolutely a no-nonsense coach. So you got a couple guys up front coaching that defensive line that are all business, that have a track record of, I think, squeezing and maximizing the production out of what they have on the roster. So we didn't get to see as much of that on day one. I'm sure we'll hear some more things about, their coaching style. One of the things that some of the offensive linemen mentioned is just how detail-oriented. Randy Clements says no such thing as a dumb question, like just really getting into the details of things, which is, I think, something that Gamecock fans will want to hear about the O-line.
Speaking of coaches, you mentioned Travian Roberts there. Did see the videos that he seems to be back out.
Yeah.
And seemingly back to normal after recovering from, obviously, the accident that kept him out for most of last season.
That was so awesome to see. He looks great. He's out there standing around, walking around, doing his thing. That was one of the first things I saw walking in practice, after we got out of the indoor when they're stretching and getting out on the field to do the drill work. I walked right by the D-line because he was kind of right up front, and he's over there talking to guys and out there doing his thing. So that was awesome to see because that was a scary situation, when it happened. So awesome to see him back out there.
I imagine nobody in that defensive line room can use I'm not feeling great today, coach, or my ankle hurts a little bit, and
yeah,
I almost died in a car wreck last year, right? And I'm back here again, yeah, not too many excuses go flying around that room, I would imagine.
And I think that's the case. Like I said, he's a no nonsense guy. I mean, Travian was a tone setter on that D line when he played here in Columbia, and that's just remained the case. That's how he operates things, and I think that's why he's been really good developing players, not only here at South Carolina. I mean, you look at what Nick Barrett did, as a senior when he got his opportunity to step into that role. But Travian has a really nice track record of developing guys. He's got a good coaching mind. He's no nonsense for sure.
Yeah, so good to see that. Again, that's what they were able to see from their short viewing window of practice. And Jack, I know, is headed back over to the football facility because said we're going to hear from some players today. Don't know who specifically, but we'll obviously hopefully be able to gather some stuff from that as well as we get spring practice rolling. Of course, yesterday, Coach Beamer addressed the media ahead of spring practice and dropped the bombshell that we've been talking about all morning long, that being Josiah Thompson being out for the upcoming 2026 season. We'll get into that and what that means for this team going forward coming up next as the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs rolls along here on the game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and Chris along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Yesterday afternoon during Coach Beamer's press conference, you heard, well, maybe you didn't hear because they once again had technical problems. It's been kind of a bugaboo as of late. There's always some kind of technical problem when Beamer gets up to the microphone, so hopefully we get those straightened out soon. But if you didn't hear it, you at least saw it on Twitter or read it on places like Gamecock Central that Josiah Thompson is going to miss the upcoming 2026 season, dealing with some form of lower body injury. Coach Beamer did not give all the specifics on that, but he did go into more detail in the press conference about kind of the timeline of how long this had been a problem for Josiah Thompson. And here's what he said.
I knew that whenever we meaning Josiah, his family, the doctors, if and when they decided to do this surgery, that it would be most likely a season-ending type surgery. So we had this conversation with them last year and whatnot. But in regards to Josiah's status on our football team, in regards to whether he came back or didn't come back, from our standpoint, the surgery had nothing to do with it. It was, I always want what's best for each young man in our program, and Josiah is an awesome young man. His mom and dad are special people, and this will be, the best thing for them to allow him to play football at South Carolina in 2027 and beyond 2027 as a hopefully professional football player too. This is the best thing for him to be able to just continue to, be at his best.
So based off that answer, this is not something that just suddenly popped up. It's something that Josiah Thompson had been dealing with for a while. Did you or Wes have any inkling of anything like this that could have been bothering him last year?
Yeah, it's something we've kind of hinted at that I think you got to be really careful, especially with injury stuff. And Wes is not here to be able to say it himself, so I'm going to properly credit him. We were talking about it on GC Live on our podcast yesterday. When you look at last year, let's back up. Josiah, 5-star, comes in as a true freshman, plays, holds his own, has a pretty good year. And when you kind of looked at last year, again, there were so many things with this offense that were broken just as a whole. But individually, you kind of watched Josiah and kind of felt like, man, he kind of took a step back. Now, why is that? Well, now that you have this information out in the open, it helps give you another answer, in that he wasn't 100%. It's something we hinted at, going into this spring, because when the Jacarius Peak news dropped, after you get over that gut punch, if you have, you kind of go, okay, well, what's next? And you start thinking, well, this will probably be a really big year for Josiah Thompson. Maybe if you're kind of penciling him, hey, I wonder if he plays right tackle. Maybe you're thinking, okay, well, maybe he moves back to left. Can he make a jump? And one of the things was, hey, he's going to have to get fully healthy. And one of the questions we've gotten, Tyler, about this is, well, why now? Why not like right after the season? Why not, late last season or during the middle of the season? Without having a completely full picture of the situation and the surgery and all that, and not going too far into it, I think it's one of those things where you decide, am I going to do this or not? Is it completely necessary? Do I need to do it? And Beamer kind of alluded to it there. It's a process of making that decision, because clearly this type of surgery puts you on the shelf for a long time. Frankly, I don't know if he had it done in January. I don't know if that changes the timeline for this season at all. It might, maybe late season. But when you're having it right now and you're already, it's unlikely you're going to play, that wouldn't put you back in September, for instance, for the opener if you go ahead and have this surgery. So it's something that everybody decided, like, this is best long-term for him. It's a blow because you're down another guy. You're down a guy that, has played for you for a couple years and could, in a new scheme with a new coach, could take a step forward as a junior. But also, I think you go back to what I was talking about earlier. How much was this holding him back on the field from realizing his potential? And clearly it was deemed that this is something that you need to get fixed. It's just, unfortunately, the other side of that is a lengthy recovery process.
And that's kind of the double-edged sword to this, because it is unfortunate that he's not getting the opportunity to play this upcoming year. And like you said, I think once he took his name out of the portal and decided to come back, we were all intrigued to see, with a new offensive line coach and a new offense, how he could potentially be plugged in and hopefully succeed and find his way maybe to being the starting right tackle or whatever it may be. But there is now optimism, now having to look to 2027, if he is still around at South Carolina at that point in time, of being able to build off that, because that was the frustrating part about this past year, was we knew what he did in his freshman year. We knew what his upside potential was as a 5-star, and it just was not equating on the field. And you're like, man, what's wrong with this guy? Is it the coaching? Is it Lonnie Teasley? Is that the reason why he's taking these steps back? And I thought it was interesting, when Beamer detailed a little bit more about the injury, about not being able to do what he needed to do in the weight room. That very much backs up what we saw on the field last year, where he was getting pushed around a lot, getting put on his butt. He just didn't look as strong as he did his freshman year, and that would obviously explain it if he's not able to go out there and push the weight he needs to push in the locker, or in the weight room for a position like left tackle, especially, or any spot on the offensive line. You got to be strong to be able to hold your own against these elite pass rushers you're going up against in the SEC, and it just didn't look good last year. And again, we don't know the specifics of that. We just know it's a lower body injury, but that would explain part of it, at least, as to why maybe he struggled and looked the way that he did last year.
Yeah, it definitely gives you some context there. And, football is a game of movement and trying to move people against their will. And if you're not moving as well on your own, as you could, if you're not 100% in that regard, it's going to be tough. And so any lower body injury for a game where you're running, pushing, pulling, that's going to be tough, right? And especially when you think about a position like the offensive line, where you're moving your feet and anchoring against, first-round draft picks several weeks out of the year lined up across from you, that makes it difficult. So, I think it's tough for Josiah. It's tough for South Carolina. It's tough for Jacarius Peak. Same, different type of situation in terms of the injury and surgery and all that kind of stuff. But your depth is now being tested very, very early. And so, one of the things that we've talked about is, okay, you got the Jacarius Peak, and then you go to Thompson, and then Thompson's not going to be in the picture. You hope, and that's kind of a moving target. You got to wait and see on Peak. Obviously, hope you can get him back as soon as possible for the season. It's going to be a while, though, before I think we have an answer to that. What's next? And, who steps forward? You got a few other transfers that could factor in there. You have Shed Surratt, who's played guard and tackle last year. You have Demola Ejida, who is a redshirt freshman. I think those guys become even more important now, because you're going to need depth throughout the spring and summer and preseason camp, but you also, are going to need additional depth during the football season. So we're already kind of looking ahead to that picture. It's going to be really important, the development throughout the spring for some of those other guys.
We'll get into a little bit more of what Beamer said in reference to what the plan's going to be at those two respective tackle spots, now that what we assumed was going to be your starter at left tackle and possibly your starter at right tackle not going to be available for the duration of this offseason. Again, Peak's planning to come back around September when the season begins. We'll see what shape he's in, and obviously Josiah Thompson lost for the 2026 season. So more of Beamer coming up next as the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, rolls along on your Wednesday on the Game.
One of our great partners here on the Game, Michael, Nathan, the team over at Integrated Media. You hear us talk about them every day. They're our go-to tech solution. helped outfit us with the game TV here in the studio. For those of you that watch the stream on YouTube, they do an amazing job here. Also done an amazing job at my home and at Wes Mitchell's home. Anything you need from a tech or audiovisual standpoint, they can do it for you. They could even install security and cameras around your home. They always have amazing ideas. If you're thinking, hey, I'd like to upgrade my TV watching, movie watching, Netflix experience. Hey, I'd like to upgrade my sports watching experience. If you want that patio area outfitted with wireless speakers and a television, if you want a man cave, they can do it for you. They can do all that, source the equipment, come out to your home, professionally install it. IntegratedMediaInc.com or 803-948-8327. Internet, AV, TVs, they can do it all. Integrated Media.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and Chris along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Another reminder, coming up on Friday, April 3rd, it's the 107.5 Game Spring Golf Classic out at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Saki's Morning Libations Bar will be providing the drinks. The onion sausage will be provided by our friends over at the Lexington Gamecock Club, and the golf gun makes its return as well. So if you want to take part, it is $400 for a team. Give Charwood a call at 803-755-2000 and press the number 2 to register. Again, 888-755-2000 and press the number 2 to register for the game's Spring Golf Classic. We're continuing to talk about the fallout of the news yesterday that we learned that Josiah Thompson is going to miss the 2026 football season with some form of lower body injury. We'll have procedure done and hope to be back and in good form for 2027. But that obviously creates yet another hole in the offensive line for this offseason as Jacarius Peak will not be available through the spring and through the summer. And Coach Beamer yesterday was asked, hey, what's the plan at tackle with those two guys being down?
Yeah, we've got some guys with some flexibility. Certainly, I think this is no different, and y'all have heard me say this before during spring practice, trying to maximize what guys can do, and the more you can do, the better. With this portal class, with this high school class, we've brought in some guys on the offensive line, certainly that have position flexibility, that can play multiple positions along the offensive line, and this will be, it stinks, I'm not going to lie, but it's an opportunity now for these other guys to get more work and get better and then figure out what it best looks like. So in regards to what it's going to look like, the first rep of practice tomorrow from left to right, not going to get into all that. Jordan and some of these guys can break down the offensive line depth chart and where they line up in individual drills tomorrow. But really, we got 15 practices to figure out, who goes where and who can do what, knowing we got Darius Gray coming in here in the summertime too, along with getting Jay Peak back healthy too, who I just saw downstairs with his mom and is doing awesome and in great spirits.
Yeah, to throw that last little part in there to give people a reason for hope and optimism considering the Josiah Thompson news, I guess. But when you look at the handy-dandy Gamecock Central scholarship breakdown, 5 true tackles listed on here with Peak, Seth Smith, Josiah Thompson, Nieves, and Demila Ajudahan. But as he mentioned there as well, yes, I've been practicing that, but as he mentioned there as well, a lot of guys with position versatility. As we went through the transfer portal, as these guys were coming in a couple months ago, that's one thing that we pointed out for almost all of them. Now, not all of them play guard and tackle, but pretty much all of them have the ability to move around in some form or fashion on the offensive line. You hope you weren't going to have to test that out this quickly, but you're in a situation now where guys like a Seth Smith, Emmanuel Poku, Dane Arnett may be asked to bump out to one of those tackle spots because you have that need right now.
Yeah, Arnett played left tackle at Ferris State, which if you're saying, well, it's a lot different to play left tackle at Ferris State and in the SEC, you're right. He has kind of more, I think, of maybe a guard-type body for this level, but he has played out there. Kojo Poku, when they signed him from East Carolina, has played tackle. South Carolina thought, hey, maybe more of a guard for us in our scheme, but is he someone who could do it? Yes, not just in theory. He's done it at the college level, so you could always look at that. I mentioned Shed Surratt. As a true freshman, he played, 3 or 4 different positions, whether it was in practice or in games. Worked on both sides at left and right tackle, can play guard for you. You've got Nieves and Seth Smith as transfers who are more true tackles. If you kind of looked at those guys and said, hey, these might be more depth additions for this year for our purposes, maybe so, but the equation has changed here.
Well, now you're needing that depth.
You need that depth, and you like to have depth, Sure. The reality is that has already been tested and diminished. At least one of those guys, Thompson, for all intents and purposes, out for the season, and we'll see on Peak. So you definitely are going to have to plug in some other pieces and figure out, you probably came in, January, you're sitting there, if you're the staff or even just as a fan, and you're sketching out kind of your depth chart, your A group, your B group, how things may shake out. And that has been, you can kind of toss that out the window now. And so now you're going, all right, who do we plug in where? So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, Beamer talked about trying to run down the depth chart or talk about it. We didn't get to see that day one.
No.
We do have, next Wednesday we'll get another practice. We get another one after that. I think there's a random Tuesday in there before they finish spring as well. So we get 3 or 4 more opportunities, I think, to see practice. So hopefully at one point they'll throw us a bone. I also think we'll just hear some things, right, along the way. We're not going to hear it on day one because whatever it is day one can change. The staff's going to get out there, get some feedback. They have ideas of what it may look like, and that may change on the fly too.
Well, the unfortunate part about this, dealing with these type of injuries, and again, the expectation is that Jakarius Peak will be back for the year, but you're now talking about your 2 tackle spots having to go to plan B, at least for the time being, and people can roll their eyes at this because we talk about it so much, but continuity and gelling and all that matter on the offensive line because it's a unit that moves as one despite it being 5 individual guys, and the more reps you have together on an offensive line, it only helps you out, right? And when you're looking at what this offensive line is anticipated to be, before we knew about any of these injuries, you're roughly looking at 5 guys that had never played together before. So the reps you get in spring, the reps you get in summer, fall camp, and all that are going to go a long way. And now you're obviously talking about not having your presumed starting left tackle at any point during that time. And now you're trying to figure out who that right tackle is going to be, which means you're going to have guys swapping in and out as that position battle goes on. Again, you could be flip-flopping guys in the interior as well, depending on how they're performing in practice. So it's going to be a little bit before you're able to establish that continuity that you want for that unit.
It is, and I think that would be the case to some degree if you had a fully healthy, let's say Peak's out there, and let's say, for the purposes of this example, they said, hey, let's put Josiah at right tackle if he was fully healthy. It might even take some time then because then, okay, Josiah's moving positions to a different side. You've got a couple transfers that are going to plug in. Carter Miller at center, new scheme, new guy in there. Throw in a Hank Purvis, at guard, and then say Surratt stays at guard. There's going to be some gelling there regardless because even for the guys that are coming back, like a Surratt, new scheme, new coach, new techniques that you're learning how to play. And so there'd be some gelling anyway. So it makes it more challenging, like you said, to come along dipping into that depth already, not having as much depth just to go through practice. Beamer did say he feels like they'll be all right from a practice standpoint. They're not at this point, and you kind of knock on wood for sure, they're not in that situation they were in during the 2023 season where it's not even just a few of your starters being out, it's some of your walk-ons and backups. And so there was a point in the 2023 season where they're down like 10 guys. It gets hard to practice.
Yeah, they said
frankly.
they didn't have a second unit. It's like we have 5 or like 6.
Yeah.
You didn't have enough to have a decent second rotation of guys for practice.
You had a walk-on, and during that season, you had a walk-on tight end playing left tackle, at one point. So they're thankfully not there at this point, and hopefully you avoid any further injuries. Hopefully you get Peak back. Hopefully Thompson has a successful surgery and recovery that won't really have anything to do with this season from what we see. I mean, Beamer didn't totally rule it out, but for all intents and purposes, sound like he's out for this season. Hopefully all that goes well. But there is more, for a unit where if you looked at last year, this is the one above any other that has to get figured out. It becomes more of a challenge now.
Was it Javon Gwynn that got hurt in spring practice in 23? Is that where the dominoes started falling for the offensive line? I remember that correctly.
I think Gwynn, wasn't his last year 22?
Was it 22?
Am I crazy?
Somebody got hurt that spring, and that's where it kind of all fell apart.
Let me effort that. So Javon, his last year was 22 because he was drafted in 2023.
Okay.
Yeah, honestly, man, I don't even like that season.
Because then you had in the opener, Case and Henry got hurt on like the second play of the game.
He got rolled up.
Yeah.
It was because it was you were. I think you were already without your left tackle going into that game, and then it was, boom. Okay, there's another hit, and then they kind of just kept coming, throughout the year. And again, even like dipping in, people don't talk about. If you say, oh, well, a few of our walk-ons are hurt, people go, big deal. It's not just about the games. You got to be able to go out there and effectively practice, and that year it was tough. So it sounds like Beamer doesn't feel like they're there yet. I'm sure there's a concern level because now you're down a couple potential starters or definite starters, on the offensive line. And again, with the need to correct this issue, you can't just gloss over it, but you also don't want to go up. Season's over before it even started. Like you can't play that game either. I don't think
your margin for error got a whole lot thinner,
It did.
right? Again, and there's a reason why they kept bringing in linemen and kept bringing in linemen as they've done the past couple of years. Because you can never have too much depth for these exact type of situations. And again, we're not in panic mode yet, but it is concerning that you've now lost 2 guys. Prior to taking the first snaps of spring practice, and hopefully everybody can stay healthy. Knock on wood as we go through the next handful of months to not have to worry about anything else.
I got your answer. It was Jalen Nichols.
Nichols, okay,
because he was going to be the left tackle.
Okay.
Yeah, he got an injury, but then you
I don't know
had
why I was thinking Javon Gordon.
Yeah, Brubaker, preseason knee injury. Kason Henry, week 1.
Yep.
Marky Anderson got banged up week 1. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 other guys also throughout the course of the year got injured, including your favorite player, even Vershawn Lee.
Right,
he had a knee injury.
It was a tough year because I think it was the 10th game, I want to say Vanderbilt, before they finally had back-to-back weeks with the same starting 5. And you're not going to have very much success doing that, certainly in the SEC.
It makes it very, very challenging.
It does. It does. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the hour. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here in the game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and Chris wrapping up the hour here on your Wednesday on the game. As I mentioned earlier, tomorrow from 9 until noon, we'll be out at Griffin Pools and Spas on North Lake Drive in Lexington, right over there by the dam at Lake Murray, hanging out. Getting you set for Gamecock women's basketball, heading up to the SEC women's tournament coming up on Friday. Of course, a full weekend of Gamecock baseball as well. So come by and see us again tomorrow from 9 to noon out there at Griffin Pools and Spas in Lexington. Again, rightfully so, we've spent the most of this hour talking about the Josiah Thompson injury. And, when you couple that with what happened with Jacarius Peak, you're talking about 2 potential starting tackles for a football team being out before spring practice begins. No fan base is going to be thrilled about that, and that's obviously going to bring a certain level of panic and concern. But, man, I really feel for this fan base, man, because they haven't been given a ton of things to be excited about from a men's sports perspective, basically since the Clemson game at the end of 2024. And I don't know if somebody sold their soul to the devil or made promises that, ended up coming back to bite them after the fact. But, when you couple, what's going on with men's basketball, baseball getting off to a rocky start this year, and then you throw the injuries in there as well, it's a rough time right now, man, for men's sports. And I can understand the people that fully embrace the chicken curse.
I'll never believe in the chicken curse.
You'll never believe in it?
Nope.
Are you superstitious at all?
Nope.
No, not at all? Like you could step on a crack, you're not afraid if a black cat runs in front of you, spill salt, all that kind of stuff?
Nope. It's funny, too. I know some people who are, people of faith and all that, and they'll be like, oh, you can't do that. And I'm like, all right, well, what's the supposed outcome if you do that? Well, it's bad luck for this. I'm like,
It's one of those, well, don't you know?
Yeah.
Type thing.
You never heard of that? Yeah, I don't. I'm really not. I'm anti-superstitious.
See, I'm very superstitious. I'm very
you're a baseball guy coming up. Is that where you got it?
Probably. Yeah, that's probably where it originated from. Again, I do the salt over the shoulder thing. All those very
really.
Yeah. If I spill salt, I got to throw it over my shoulder because I don't take the chance, man.
You throw it over the correct shoulder.
I do.
Do you hit sea bass? Have you ever hit sea bass like in Dumb and Dumber?
I've not done that. I've not thrown the entire salt shaker, thankfully.
In your burger.
But
whole thing.
But I can sympathize with people. And look, I'm an Atlanta sports fan, and there have been plenty of bad things. The Braves are going through a lot of bad luck right now that people are just kind of chalking it up to being Atlanta sports. So I can sympathize with people that believe in the chicken curse. Now, again, the debate is some believe it was supposed to have gone away when they won the World Series back in 2010, but it didn't. Or maybe it's like football has to win something for it to go away. Like I'm not completely clear on that part.
Yeah, I don't believe in it. I really don't. Like I can get, if people say it, I'm like, all right, like because you'll talk to people. I've been going to games before you were born, and I'm like, that's absolutely true. Like,
sure.
So if you believe in it, like, I'm not going to say you can't have it. I just personally don't believe in it. I think, to win a championship, you always need some luck.
Of course.
You need some things to go your way. And I just said I'm not superstitious, and then I just talked about luck. Like, you need some things to go you need some things to happen.
The ball has to bounce your way at times. And I thought, they did that in spirit SEC story last year, and they talked about, in that championship game, the ball was doing some funny things. Like, those kind of things happen a lot of times when it comes to championships.
It does. So you need that. But I think, you got to try to make your own fate. And, I don't believe in it. By the way, Tyler, I had to bring up because you brought up the Braves. Did you see Did you see how they just copy and pasted the last Yerkson Profar? And just so it was the exact same as the last PED suspension. They just took out that they were surprised because how could you be? If they would have put that out
second time,
there would have been two things. It would have been okay. You literally copied and pasted it. A B, how could you be surprised because this has already happened? So I think they were just like, what did we say last time? Take out surprise. We're not surprised.
Yeah. Alex Anthopoulos calls up the PR department like, hey, you still got that file for last year when we had to do this? Yeah, we'll just update it.
What's it say? Read it back to me. And take out surprised.
Yeah,
we're not
surprised. I asked Jack the question in the last hour that if I promised you $15 million to not do anything illegal for the next year, certainly nothing illegal in reference to your job, could you do that? And he said, yes, no brainer, because that's essentially what Jurickson Profar is giving up here is a $15 million strike. He'll get paid nothing because he's going to miss the entire year. He can't come back for the postseason if the Braves make it. Can't play in the World Baseball Classic for Curacao. Like, he's going to have to sit on his couch making $0 for the next 365 years. There's another year on his contract. I don't know what the Braves are going to do with that if there is a season next year because there might be a strike. So, yeah, like, dude, you screwed yourself at this point.
There was I'm going way off the rails, but There was a study by a Harvard professor, this was like 10 years ago, that the average American commits 3 felonies a day. Because you just don't know.
There's a lot of laws.
Yeah, lots of laws. Now, PED stuff, not like a law, but like it is a MLB rule. You know that. You've already got popped for it once. Like, you should know.
And look.
Maybe it was in a shampoo. I don't know.
Well, that's the thing. And his thing last year, I think it had to do with like the pregnancy hormone stuff or whatever that shows up in some of these guys' things that, you know, can be misconstrued, or like, oh, I didn't know I was taking this, or me and my wife are trying to have a baby and I took this supplement or whatever it may be. So the first time, all right, I can give you an excuse of maybe you didn't know what you were taking was going to show up a certain way or give you some kind of benefit. The second time, because if you missed half of last year, I'd be very, very careful about everything I put in my body at that point. There's no excuse this time. Listening to Atlanta radio yesterday on my drive home, everybody's ready to just throw this guy out of town. You've blown it. In 2 years with the Braves, you'll have missed 75% of games you could have played in. Like, come on, man. What are we doing? Yeah, it's been, I mean, I saw somebody put out the list of like, okay, the season hasn't even started, and here we are. Yeah, down a couple pitchers. You're starting shortstops injured. You lose what was your expected DH, I believe. It's not great.
Not great. But to go back to South Carolina, like, look, you've heard a couple things that you absolutely didn't want to hear, like going into spring ball with Thompson and certainly with the Peak news, both of them. You know, Peak's a guy where, you know, that one was really tough because he's being brought in as the top-ranked transfer at that position in the country, a position that you desperately needed to get better, and then boom, this happens, right? So I understand, like, the frustration about it, no doubt, like the disappointment, but it is what it is at this point. So you got to try to move past it. There's a lot of other areas worth tracking with this team, too. But, man, you're right. Like, Gamecock fans, hang in there. There's I don't even want to say, like, something good has to happen, but it seems like it. Hopefully things get turned around in the next few months.
Thankfully, women's sports are doing well.
Rolling along.
And you can look at that. And, again, we're fully expecting Dawn's team to make another deep run into the Final Four this year, as they do on an annual basis. Softball gets SEC play rolling later on this week against Texas. So you can at least rest in that, knowing that they're doing well. But, yeah, men's sports, it's been a rough 15 months or so.
Well, Friday, going to talk to Ashley Chastain Woodard. Right?
We are. We're going to have a very brief show because women's basketball coverage starts at 11:30. But, yes, we'll hit Ashley Chastain Woodard and just about then throw it over to Brad Muller in the Upstate for the first round of the Gamecocks' first round of the women's tournament that gets rolling today up there in Greenville. So we'll talk more about that stuff tomorrow as we're out at Griffin Pools and Spas from 9 until noon. Come by and hang out with us. Halftime show coming up next here on The Game.